Hello. My name is Jerome Yates, and I'm 78 years old. They told me I was too tired for Hawaii, too forgetful to join. But the real plan? It started years ago. Quiet suggestions, moved boxes, a missing seat on a flight I paid for. Now, I sit alone, not because I left my family, because they erased me first. They forged my name, emptied my home, rewrote my wife's will, and when they returned, the house didn't recognize them. Ever wondered what it feels like to become invisible inside your own legacy? Travis stood at the counter, sipping his protein shake like it was his morning ritual, while Lana scrolled through her phone with one hand and stirred oatmeal with the other. Micah was hunched over the table, headphones slung around his neck, spooning cereal into his mouth between glances at his tablet. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, my hands wrapped around a warm coffee mug, watching the family bustle around me in a rhythm I no longer felt part of. "So, what time is our flight?" I asked. Voice casual, trying not to sound too eager. Travis didn't look up. "Early," he muttered, grabbing the blender to rinse it out. "Do I need to check in online, or are you doing it for everyone?" I followed up. Lana looked up, a flicker of something crossing her face. "Oh, no worries, Dad. We've got it all taken care of. You just relax, okay? But I'd still like to know what seat I got. Window, aisle. You don't want to deal with long flights at your age, right?" She interrupted with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded slowly. "Right." Micah didn't say anything, just kept scrolling. No one looked at me after that. The moment passed, smoothed over like a wrinkle they didn't want to iron. But something inside me folded into itself. Later that morning, they were all out running errands. I was clearing dishes when I heard Lana's voice from the hallway. She wasn't talking to me, she was on the phone. "Yes, just 4 seats. It's all confirmed. Yep, same name, same reservation." She passed the kitchen. Didn't see me. I waited until I heard the front door click shut. On the counter sat a small stack of printed papers, half covered by a grocery list. The title on top read, "Boarding Passes, Hawaii Family Vacation." I lifted the list, scanned the document. 4 names, all circled in highlighter. Travis Yates, Lana Yates, Micah Yates, Melora Yates. I read it twice. I stared at the list. Yates wasn't on it. Not me. I gently set the paper back, aligning the edges like nothing had been touched. My coffee had gone cold. I poured it out slowly, the silence in the house pressing around me like a second skin. The garage was cool, quiet. I stepped in to look for the extension cord. They always managed to misplace it, and that's when I saw the box. Big, taped on the sides, sitting right by the garage door. "Old stuff. To donate." Written in thick black marker. I bent down, lifted the flaps. Inside was Sarah's recipe box. Still had the little laminated tag she glued on herself. "Best banana bread, don't touch." My retirement plaque from Evergreen High sat wedged between a stack of outdated cookbooks and a worn fleece blanket. Micah's first crayon drawing of our backyard tree was framed, slightly chipped, but intact. I lifted it out, held it for a long moment. Sarah had insisted we keep it. Said one day Micah would want to see what his imagination looked like before school and screens, and too much logic ruined it. And now it was here, in a box marked to disappear. I hadn't died yet, but they were preparing like I had. At dinner, the table was set for 4. The same roast chicken Travis liked, green beans too salty the way Lana preferred them. Micah barely looked up from his phone. "So, what time do we leave on Saturday?" I asked, feigning cheer. Travis paused mid-bite. "Oh, you're not going, Dad." I looked up, fork halfway to my mouth. Lana jumped in quickly. "We thought it'd be easier for you. All that flying, the time change, the walking. Hawaii's exhausting. But you'll have the house to yourself," she added brightly. "Nice and quiet." Micah said nothing. I smiled and nodded. My fork still hovered in midair. Then I lowered it slowly to the plate, took a sip of water, and I began to plan. 2 days had passed since the dinner where I was quietly uninvited to Hawaii. The air around the house hadn't changed much. Lana still hummed while loading the dishwasher. Travis still scrolled through work emails at the breakfast table, and Micah still wore his headphones like armor. But for me, everything had shifted. I watched more closely now, not for confrontation, but for confirmation. Micah was helping me water the yard that evening. It had rained the night before, so the ground was soft. He held the hose awkwardly with both hands, letting it swing around like a lazy snake while I trimmed the dead hydrangeas near the fence. He looked up from the spray. "When you move into the new place, Dad said I can have your room." I paused mid-snip. "My room?" "Yeah," he grinned. "He said I'd finally get to paint it black if I wanted, with, like, galaxy glow-in-the-dark stuff." I nodded, managing a chuckle. "Sounds like quite the spaceship," he beamed. "I'm gonna put my keyboard in there too. There's more outlets." "That's smart," I said. We finished watering the yard. Micah ran back inside to check on a game. I sat on the patio for a few minutes longer, letting the cool air calm the churn in my chest. No one had said a word to me about moving, but clearly, the plan was in motion. The way you don't announce the end of a party, you just stop refilling the snacks and turn off the music. That evening, I walked past the living room where Lana was helping Micah with a worksheet. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "stop asking Grandpa about the trip." Micah's voice was louder. "It's okay. Grandpa gets confused anyway." I stood frozen in the hallway. The sentence hung in the air, sharper than any accusation. I waited a few seconds, then backed away quietly. They didn't notice. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at my small desk, opened a notebook, and wrote one sentence in bold ink. "I'm not confused. I'm discarded." The next morning, the house buzzed with birthday talk. Micah's party was coming up soon, and Lana and Travis were planning everything over coffee and toast. I lingered at the edge of the kitchen, pretending to look for the pepper shaker. "Let's go with the dinosaur theme again," Lana said. "It's what he liked last year, and we can recycle the decorations." "Should we invite the Carsons? Micah gets along with their twins." "Yeah, and maybe keep it small. No interruptions this time." She said it with a smile, stirring her coffee, but the weight in that sentence landed on me like a stone. I thought of last year, how Sarah and I had made the cake from scratch, Micah standing on a stool between us, covered in frosting. He'd insisted on writing his name on top with a spoon, not a piping bag. I still remembered how Sarah whispered, "He's more of a chef than either of us." None of that came up now. No mention of me helping. No place set aside for me. Dinner that night was bland and oddly quiet. Lana passed around the roast chicken. Travis mumbled something about work. No one looked at me, and that suited me just fine. Halfway through, Travis spoke. "Dad, don't worry about the trip. Just relax. Enjoy the peace and quiet." I nodded, chewing slowly. "Peace and quiet," I repeated under my breath, almost like a prayer. After dinner, I stood alone in the living room. The only sound was the dishwasher humming from the kitchen. I looked up at Sarah's picture on the mantel. Her eyes had that same spark, like she knew more than she ever said. I touched the frame gently, then walked down the hall. In the small closet outside the laundry room, I found her old journal. I used to leave it there when I didn't want to cry in our bedroom. That night, I brought it back with me, back into the room they said I'd be giving up. The clock read 11:22. I sat down with the journal and opened to the last blank page. I wrote slowly, methodically, dates, overheard conversations, receipts, things no one knew I kept. I wasn't angry. Not yet, but I was aware. This wasn't revenge, this was preparation, and at the bottom of the page, I wrote, "If they're planning their exit, I should plan mine too, but on my terms." The house had settled into sleep, but I couldn't. I lay on my side, back to the wall, eyes fixed on the shadows cast by the nightlight in the hallway. The floor vent by my dresser let in the hum of distant voices, Travis and Lana talking in their bedroom above mine. I was about to take out my hearing aid, but their words caught the edge of my attention like fishhooks. "I don't want to deal with delays when we come back," Lana said. "We need the papers signed beforehand." Travis muttered something low. She replied, louder. "Sunset Grove. They already said they'd take him. The deposit's handled. Just get the rest of it done before we leave." I stared at the ceiling. My fingers tightened on the sheet. The vent buzzed faintly as they moved on to other things, travel insurance, sunscreen, whether or not Micah packed enough socks. But my body had already gone cold. I reached up and twisted my hearing aid off. Too late. The words had already landed, clear as if they'd been whispered right into my ear. The morning came without sleep. I got up, dressed, made coffee I didn't really want. I wandered into the den, remote in hand, hoping for something to drown out my own thoughts. When I clicked to open Netflix, the screen blinked. Account unavailable. Try again. I pressed it again. Nothing. Micah wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Hey, kiddo," I said. "Did someone change the password on the TV?" "Oh, yeah," he said, grabbing a juice box from the fridge. "Mom made a new account for our house. She said you're not on the plan anymore." He said it like he was talking about cereal choices, like it didn't mean anything. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection faint in the black glass. There I was, sitting in my own living room, watching a world I paid for slowly walk away without me. Later that day, as I walked down the hallway, I noticed Sarah's picture was off-center, the frame tilted sharply like it had been bumped too many times without care. I pulled a stool from the corner, climbed up, and straightened it. My hands shook slightly, not from effort, but from everything else. As I adjusted the frame, a small slip of folded paper fell behind the baseboard. I stepped down and picked it up. It was old, yellowed, folded 3 times, edges rounded soft from time. Sarah's handwriting. I didn't open it, not yet. I slid it into my shirt pocket and whispered to the wall. Even you knew she was slipping away. The kitchen was warm with sunlight when I came in for breakfast. Lana smiled too brightly. "Morning. Jerome, eggs are on the stove. Want toast?" I nodded. Travis sipped coffee while scrolling on his phone. "Oh, by the way," he said casually, "the lawyer said we can get early paperwork done this week, just in case something happens while we're gone." I said nothing, just kept chewing. The toast tasted like sawdust. Back in my room, I opened the notebook again. I added a new page. Deposits, lawyer, Netflix, vents. They weren't planning for my safety. They were planning for my absence. That evening, I sat in the corner chair in my bedroom, the one Sarah always liked for reading. The house buzzed around me like I wasn't part of it. I watched Travis walk through the living room talking loudly on his phone, Lana laughing as she packed upstairs, Micah humming to himself in his room. None of it included me. None of it was meant to. I opened Sarah's drawer. Inside was the jewelry box with her wedding ring. I took the folded note and placed it next to it, sealing the 2 pieces together. My hand hovered over the notebook once more before I closed it. They planned a trip to escape. I'll plan one to return to myself. The mail sat where it always did, half tucked behind the salt container on the kitchen counter. I sifted through the usual: utility bills, a catalog for orthopedic sandals, a charity plea from an animal shelter I'd never heard of. One envelope stood out, heavy paper, thick, with its corner poking out of a manila sleeve as if it couldn't wait to be seen. I pulled it free. A sample card, matte white with gold embossing. The front read, "Our forever home, a gift from Dad." Inside, in elegant serif letters, "Join us as we celebrate the transfer of legacy." I read it once. Then again, the ink was barely dry. But the betrayal, it was permanent. I stood there for a long time, fingers numb around the card. The words didn't sting immediately. They throbbed, slow and cruel, like a bruise forming under the skin. Later that day, I walked past the hallway where Lana's voice echoed from the guest room. She was on a video call, laughing softly, her voice upbeat and smooth like butter on a hot skillet. "We'll finalize the graphic once we're back," she said. "We'll tell Dad right before. Just ease him into it. Make it feel like it was his idea." A pause, then a chuckle. "He's sentimental. If we sell it right, he'll probably think it was his decision all along." My hand gripped the edge of the wall. I turned away and walked back into the kitchen. I slid the card back into its envelope, grabbed a red pen from the drawer, and scrawled one word across the front. Celebration. The next afternoon. I stepped outside to water the front garden. The sun peeked through the clouds, and the hose hissed faintly as it arced over the begonias. I was lost in thought until I heard someone call my name. "Jerome." Ida Bramble, our neighbor from 2 houses down, was walking her little mutt. She smiled wide and waved. I heard you're finally moving to that nice elder village. I blinked. Come again? She laughed lightly. Your son mentioned it last week. Said you were ready for some peace and quiet. Sunset Grove, right? I've heard great things. My stomach clenched, but I smiled anyway. Thanks, Ida. Appreciate the kind words. I turned off the hose, walked back inside. The water continued to drip behind me as I closed the front door and locked it. That evening, I waited until Travis got back from his late grocery run. He came in through the garage, humming to himself, and tossed the keys into the dish by the door. I sat in the living room, the envelope in my lap. He noticed me, hesitated. I lifted the card and held it up. You're throwing a party I'm not invited to, I said, voice steady. For a gift I haven't given? Travis froze. Dad, it's just a symbolic thing. I stared. We thought it'd be a surprise. I stood slowly. You don't surprise a man with the funeral of his independence. Come on, that's not fair. You didn't ask. You assumed. You planned without me. Not for me. And you told the neighbors before you told your own father. He had nothing left to say. I placed the card on the coffee table and walked past him. The hallway felt colder than usual, like the air had been let out of the whole house. Upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed. Sarah's framed photo still faced the door, a little crooked from yesterday's draft. I took the card, slid it next to her picture. Then I wrote a note on a yellow post-it and stuck it beneath the frame. They're planning a celebration of conquest. I adjusted the photo, aligning its edges just right. The picture stayed upright, but I had tilted. Dinner was in an hour. Lana moved through the kitchen, humming along with the radio while slicing squash. Travis was outside lighting the grill. I stood in the hallway just outside the living room, holding something I'd taken out of Sarah's jewelry drawer an hour ago. The velvet box felt heavier than I remembered. I walked into the room and waited until Lana noticed me. She glanced up, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Hey, dinner's almost ready. I know, I said. Before everyone sits down, I wanted to give you something. She looked at the box. Her smile tightened as I opened it, revealing the antique brooch Sarah wore every Christmas. Gold leaves, a single opal in the center, her mother's before hers. Lana leaned in, eyes scanning it. That's sweet. Jerome, she said with a polite laugh. But it's not really my style. Honestly, maybe we can sell it. I've been thinking we could use that money toward the kitchen reno. She turned back to her pot. I closed the box quietly and slid it back into my pocket. Sure, I said. At dinner, we sat around the table like nothing had happened. Travis passed the rolls. Lana commented on the grill marks on the chicken. I kept my voice to one-syllable replies. Then Travis spoke without looking at me. Oh, Melora called. She scheduled a consult with the interior designer. He's coming Monday to take a look at the sunroom. I set down my fork. The sunroom? I asked. She thought it'd be good to open it up. You know, more light. Maybe knock down that old divider. I looked up. This is still my house. Lana smiled too fast. Of course. That's why we're trying to elevate it. I looked at the plate in front of me, then past it, into the hallway, where the light from Sarah's old lamp cast a crooked shadow on the floor. Later, in my bedroom, I found fabric swatches on my desk, 3 different palettes, labeled Option A, Option B, Minimalist Coastal. There were notes in a handwriting that wasn't mine, color samples. 2, my chair had been moved. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. Nothing had been taken, but things had been touched, shifted. I reached for the drawer handle but stopped halfway. I've become an obstacle they decorate around, I whispered. I stood up, walked to Sarah's drawer, and opened it. The brooch went back in, nestled between her old Sunday gloves and a faded scarf that still smelled like lilac. As I rearranged the box, I noticed something loose under the velvet lining. I peeled it back and found a folded note. Sarah's handwriting, aged but firm. Your steadiness is what makes this house a home. I smiled, not the kind that reached the eyes, but the kind that kept you steady. I folded it back carefully and locked the drawer. The house was quiet that night. Lana had gone to bed early. Travis was finishing emails in the den. I walked into the living room for a glass of water and stopped short. Melora was on the phone, standing near the fireplace. Her voice was low, but the words were clear. Yes, yes, we'll take that bookshelf out. Too heavy looking. Oh, and cover that fireplace. The brick's so dated. She didn't see me. The lamp behind the couch was off, and I stood there in the dark, listening. She laughed. By the time we're back, it'll feel like a whole new place. I took a slow step back. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and took a picture. Just one, of the room, the way it was, the fireplace, the built-in shelves, the place Sarah decorated by hand when we moved in 50 years ago. I saved the photo. No caption, just saved. I didn't check my email often, mostly junk, ads, or updates from an old veterans newsletter, but that morning, I opened it anyway. Old habits. I scrolled without thinking until a subject line caught my eye. Finalizing elder care transition and deed authorization. It was from Corbin Mallow's law office. Somehow, I'd been CC'd. Probably a mistake, but a revealing one. I clicked. Inside the email was a PDF attachment with my full name on the top line. The language was clean, corporate, like it had been scrubbed by a dozen paralegals. As long as Mr. Yates doesn't contest, the transfer will go smoothly. Contest. As if I were the final hurdle in a race they already thought they'd won. I didn't speak. I didn't move for several minutes. Then I stood, printed the email, and slipped it into a manila folder I labeled that morning in red ink. Injustice. Midday light streamed across my desk as I opened my file drawer. I pulled out old folders, deed copies, tax forms, Sarah's careful notes from years ago about property taxes. I laid them all out on the desk. Then I found it, the deed, and then another document, one that was supposed to be filed on my behalf. It had my signature, but it wasn't mine, not this time. I retrieved an older file Sarah and I had signed together. I held them side by side under the lamp. The pen stroke, the angle, the slight skip over the Y in Yates. They matched too perfectly to be real. I circled the matching flaw in red ink. Then I snapped a picture with my phone and stared at it. They didn't just plan to erase me. They cloned my consent. The afternoon was calm, birds chirping, lawnmowers humming in the distance. I walked to the bench behind the library, the same one Sarah used to read at. I sat and called Eldon Cipher. "Jerome?" he answered. "They forged my signature. I have proof." There was a pause. "Email it to me, now. And stay quiet. I'll come over tonight. We'll make copies." I ended the call. My shoulders dropped, not from defeat, but relief. This wasn't about holding on anymore. This was about not letting go without a record. "This isn't survival," I whispered. "It's documentation for freedom." Back at the house, the kitchen smelled of oranges. Travis was making tea. "Hey, Dad," he said, smiling. "You get the insurance flyer I left on your desk?" I did. "Oh, that? Just routine stuff, disability coverage, long-term care, nothing to worry about." He kept smiling, but I watched his grip on the coffee mug tighten. I smiled back. "Good to know. Just wanted to be sure." I walked out before he could say anything else. Upstairs. I closed the door and sat at my desk. The folder I'd started that morning now held more weight than any safe deposit box ever could. I added a few more tabs. Deed insurance, medical forgery. Each label written in Sarah's old calligraphy pen. I sat for a while, then reached for the last notepad Sarah had used for grocery lists. I tore out a clean page and wrote slowly, "If they want a future without me, I'll leave the house with no past." The morning after I discovered the paperwork, I walked into Travis's study to grab a stapler and saw a stack of freshly printed photos on his printer tray. There they stood. Lana, Travis, Micah, Melora in front of my house, smiling under a bright banner reading, "Our legacy begins here." I wasn't in any of them. My breath caught. I flipped the top print face down and walked away, heart heavy. At brunch, Silence filled the kitchen until I placed that photo in front of Travis. He shrugged, voice smooth and nearly amused. It's just a marketing idea for the listing, in case we go public someday. You wouldn't want to be on Zillow, right? I watched his lips form the words, saw how he assumed I'd laugh it off. Instead, I traced the photo's border, pressed it flat, then tore it quietly in two. No flap, no sound, just two halves gone. Later that afternoon, I made my way to the garage searching for Sarah's garden clippers. Light filtered through dusty windows. There, beside the bins, sat a cardboard box I recognized instantly. Years ago, I'd written Sarah's keepsakes on it in old, familiar handwriting. Now a new label was taped across. Declutter, trash. It leaned beside garbage cans like someone intended to pitch it. Slowly, carefully, I pulled it back indoors. Upstairs, in my room, I spread its contents on the bed, pressed flower books Sarah made, her apron with faint smell of herbs, and Micah's birthday cards from when he was 5. I lit a small candle and placed one photograph upright, the three of us, Sarah, my young grandson, and me. On the back I read the caption Sarah wrote in her neat script, 3 roots, 1 tree. I closed my eyes, felt her presence, and let the flame continue its quiet glow. Evening arrived without fanfare. I expected a call from Eldon or neighbor Ida, maybe a quiet reassurance. But what came was a pocket dial voicemail from Travis. I recognized his voice. Yeah, the place is practically ours now. Just need Dad out without a scene. I listened once, twice. The words sunk in like cold water. My skin tingled. Resolve settled. I started packing. Under the lamp in my room, I folded shirts, my old journal, Sarah's recipe notebook, and placed them into a suitcase. I left no room for hesitation. I folded one last book into my bag, Sarah's pressed flower album. When I zipped it shut, I felt something solid settle inside myself. If they planned a party without the guest of honor, I would go, but I would leave with my dignity, my memories, undisturbed. I lined up essentials by the doorway, documents I had gathered, the photo with Sarah and Micah, my wedding band. I edged out as dusk turned the windows blue. I paused at the threshold, breathing deeply, tasting freedom in the air. The morning air felt unusually light, like the house had exhaled now that it was just me. Travis tossed 2 bags in the trunk. Micah bounced in his seat humming something off-key, and Lana double-checked the boarding passes on her phone. After this trip, Travis said, things will be locked in. No more delays. Lana smiled without looking at me. He doesn't even ask anymore. That's the beauty of trust. I nodded. Put the car into drive. Not a word. Just the rhythm of the wheels turning under a silence I no longer tried to fill. At SeaTac drop-off, they barely looked back. Travis tossed me a wave. Lana adjusted her sunglasses. Micah blew a distracted kiss. I watched them fade into the terminal, then drove home slower than I needed to, as if the quiet was something I hadn't earned yet. Back at the house, I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out the number scribbled in my notebook. Zachary Allen, the real estate agent I'd overheard them mention last week. Zachary, I said when he picked up, this is Jerome Yates. I'd like to sell my house. Fast. There was a pause. Sir? Before they come back. 2 weeks tops. Can you handle that? I can. I hung up, stood still for a moment, then went upstairs. My room, my refuge, hadn't changed since I last closed the door. I opened the folder. Inside were papers I'd gathered, copies I'd labeled in pen, lines highlighted in orange, my deed, bank statements, identification, and there, tucked between pages, a loan application, addressed from a firm in downtown Seattle, listing my home as collateral. The borrower, Travis Yates. They bet my shelter for their trip. The kitchen door creaked around 3 p.m. Zachary stepped inside. Young but not smug. Wore a suit with dust on the cuffs like he'd been in and out of too many places already. He walked through the house, nodded quietly, made notes. In the living room, I handed him the proof. He blinked. They forged your name on the loan. I know. This is serious, which is why they deserve to come back to a stranger's lock on their dream. He didn't argue, just nodded. By nightfall, the house seemed more hollow. I pulled a manila envelope from the bottom drawer. Inside, Sarah's photo of us on the porch the year we paid off the mortgage. Her handwriting on the back, built together, kept together. I placed it gently beside the listing documents, then sealed everything inside a folder I labeled, "Not Forgotten." I signed the final line on the sale authorization. The pen didn't shake. I protected it while she lived. Now I release it to protect myself. The wheels of the taxi hadn't even fully stopped when Travis leapt out. His lei still fresh around his neck. Lana followed. Sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown, dragging 2 overstuffed bags behind her. Micah trailed, clutching a foam turtle keychain, yawning. Travis pulled his keys from his pocket, twirling them once like he was about to unlock a treasure chest. He reached the front door, inserted the key, and nothing. He tried again, then rattled the handle, harder this time. What the hell? A man opened the door from the inside. Crisp shirt, gray hair combed neatly, and the kind of calm expression that only comes from legal certainty. "Can I help you?" he asked. Lana laughed, short and confused. This is our house." The man looked at them with polite confusion. "I'm afraid not. We closed last week. Jerome Yates finalized everything." Travis turned red. "That's my father." The man nodded. "I know. I met him." Silence. Only the distant hum of their ride pulling away. Travis slammed his fist against the porch railing. "This is a mistake. We'll call a lawyer." Melora's voice shook from behind him. "Get him on the phone. This is a misunderstanding. It has to be." But no one moved. The neighbors did. Though, one by one, blinds shifted, heads peered out, and from across the street, Ida Bramble walked over slowly, a small envelope in hand. She looked at them, her face not unkind. "I was asked to give you this." Travis opened the envelope. A slip of paper. Nothing more. "Your inheritance is now in Unit 417. He didn't speak. Didn't have to. Lana collapsed onto the grass, sobbing into her hands. Back in my apartment, the sun leaned against the blinds, warm and uninterested. My phone buzzed beside the plant I'd kept alive with moderate luck. Sarah's old ivy, still hanging on. 18 missed calls. I turned the phone face down and returned to my chair. The jazz station was playing something slow. I didn't recognize it, but it fit. They were calling a man they assumed was broken. I was sipping coffee. I reached for the voicemail button eventually. Ida's voice came through. Steady. "They showed up furious, Jerome. You should have seen Lana's face. I told them what you said. You're safe. You're not hiding. But you're also not interested in being found yet." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Later, I called Everett. His laugh crackled over the line. "You won't believe what I heard," he said. "Someone from Travis's circle told the golf club you'd already been moved into assisted living." I chuckled. "They weren't wrong." He paused. "Oh? I just chose the kind of care I needed. My own. The light filtering through the blinds had a softness that morning, like it was being cautious not to disturb." I sat at the table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Papers spread before me like a battlefield I hadn't asked for, but one I wasn't walking away from. The insurance documents were first. I traced my name on the old beneficiary list, the one Sarah and I had updated the year she fell ill. Then the revised version, my name gone, replaced by Travis's, dated 8 weeks ago. She'd been gone 5 years. Next came the will, the tampered one. At first glance, it seemed almost identical. But the signature, they'd tried to mimic her loops and flare, but Sarah's S always dipped lower, like it had a secret. This one floated too proud. I placed them in a thick manila envelope, sealing it with my thumb pressed hard along the flap. Across the front, I wrote in black ink, "For Eldon, immediate action." They hadn't just tried to steal my home. They rewrote the last thing she ever gave me, her trust. I called Eldon right after. "They forged Sarah's signature," I said before he could even say hello. He sighed, deep and knowing. The will they've used? Inadmissible. I cross-checked dates and witnesses. Yours stands. I said nothing. He continued, voice tighter now. Jerome, they also attempted to change your life insurance beneficiary. 2 months ago. You were removed entirely. I blinked. Once. Twice. So I was erased before I even left. He didn't answer, but silence was confirmation enough. That afternoon, I cleared a space on my desk and pulled out Micah's birthday card from last year, the one with his crooked handwriting and the glittery sticker barely hanging on. I began writing. To Micah, this isn't about money, or property, or even the house. This is about what we choose to pass on. Dignity or deception. Your dad made a choice. I'm making mine. Inside this box is the wedding ring your grandma wore every day, and the recipe cards she guarded like gold. If you want to know what love looked like, start there. You choose what survives. I tucked the letter into Sarah's old recipe box and placed both in the fireproof safe. By evening, the messages started. Voicemail 1, Lana's voice, shaky. Dad, please call me. We can fix this. We didn't know. We didn't mean to. Text message. We're still your family. You can't just walk away. Another voicemail. Dad, please, don't do this to us. The last one lingered. We're your family. Don't forget that. I whispered back into the empty room. But you did. After dinner, I took the safe key and drove across town to the storage facility. The same place where their inheritance sat in boxes they hadn't even bothered to open, Unit 417. I opened it, quietly, methodically, placed the family photo of all of us, before the sickness, before the scheming, on the shelf, taped my affidavit to the inside wall, closed the safe box, locked the unit, double-checked. I handed the key to Ida later that night. They can keep the furniture, I said, but the foundation's no longer theirs. I still remember the shock of discovering the house was no longer mine, returning from everything they thought they'd won, and finding the front door locked shut. Not for me. It echoed like a judgment. I was done before I even had a chance. 2 days later, I got something that didn't surprise so much as sting. In my apartment mailbox sat an envelope from Sunset Grove. Inside was a packet of papers registering me as a new patient. They listed my medical history, allergies, even notes I'd never consented to submit, scrawled in someone else's handwriting on the margin, filed by family. Their assumption was laid bare for all to see. I held that letter in trembling fingers. Every line screamed betrayal. They had prepared for my decline more than I had prepared for my life. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit on the kitchen counter, like a wound I hadn't learned to dress yet. Later that afternoon I took Sarah's scarf, a pale blue thing I always loved, draped it around my neck, and walked to the neighborhood park. The air was soft, morning light through budding leaves. I watched a father teach his daughter to ride a bike. The little girl wobbled, the father steady behind. It pulled me back. Travis, Micah's father, at that age, with me running beside him, shouting, "Let go." Now the roles had reversed. I thought, we always give them more than they remember, except they'd decided I didn't deserve what I'd taught. Walking soothed me until anger simmered. I'd been erased in so many ways, but here, under the trees, I could breathe without someone claiming me before I consented. Once home, I sat at my desk and began drafting a letter to Sunset Grove. It went like this: I am not, nor have I ever been, under legal guardianship. I did not authorize any transfer of medical information. Kindly correct this record immediately. I attached scanned copies of legal documents proving my competence and autonomy. Then I sealed another envelope, addressed it to Eldon, and marked it. Add this to the record. Quiet, but definitive. That evening, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Lana. I hit delete without listening to the end. Her earlier texts pleaded. We didn't mean to scare you. It was just in case something happened. We still love you. But love built on assumptions and manipulation rang hollow. I wrote instead in my notebook, some doors deserve to remain locked, not out of spite, but for safety. I meant it. Then came a final note from Zachary Allen, the real estate agent. A closing statement. Sale of 847 Maple Street was complete. He confirmed the funds had cleared. I pressed the envelope, letting relief and sorrow settle side by side, and then I did something unexpected. I wrote a check, signing it under Sarah's name, donating to the local senior literacy program, the one she'd always supported. I wrote on the memo line, "In memory of things that last." Back in my small apartment, I placed Sarah's wedding photo upright on my mantel. In front of it lay my notebook, the legal letters, and a clean pen. I drank tea and let the quiet fill me. Outside, dusk came, casting soft shadows across the room. I realized they could take the house, file papers, change locks, assume decline, but they could never erase what I carry within me: love, memory, dignity. I still have doors I can choose to open or keep closed. Some doors stay closed for a reason, so that the person behind them remains intact. The breeze off the Maui coast smelled nothing like Everett. It carried no memory of chopped firewood or overgrown hedges, just salt, warmth, and a silence I didn't have to explain to anyone. I sat on the balcony of a small resort, tea cooling in my hands, the sound of waves just close enough to remind me I'd finally stepped out of their shadow. In my lap rested an envelope Sarah had once tucked into the back of an old recipe notebook, written in her unmistakable looping script. "For when you're most doubted." I unfolded it slowly, carefully. "You were never a burden, Jerome. You carried all of us. Don't let anyone rewrite that." I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just breathed, fully, deeply, for the first time in years. They rewrote the will. They even rewrote the house. But they couldn't rewrite me. Back inside, I called Eldon. His voice was tired but steady. "The documents were thrown out," he said. "The insurance changes. They flagged them. Everything's frozen. Travis won't see $1 for a long time." "Good," I replied. "Let them sit in silence for a while." I did, for 5 years. He didn't say anything for a beat, then chuckled softly. "And now? I'm somewhere quiet. Finally." After we hung up, I looked out again. The sunset wasn't just a view, it was a verdict. This time, I was the one watching them walk away. Later that night, I pulled out a yellow pad from the hotel desk. I began writing a letter to Micah. I didn't sugarcoat. I wrote about what they tried to do, how they used love like paperwork and promises like currency. I told him that he deserved truth, and I left instructions to keep the only things that ever mattered: his grandmother's recipe box and the ring she wore for 42 years. "This is what we built. You choose what survives." Messages buzzed in on my phone as I folded the letter. Dozens. Lana's voice cracked through one voicemail. "We can fix this," she pleaded. Another. "Dad, please, don't do this to us." I didn't press play on the rest. I didn't need to. They'd forgotten a long time ago that family wasn't entitlement. It was effort. The last message was slower. "We're your family. Don't forget that." I stared at the screen. "But you did," I whispered. The next morning, I drove to a small storage unit tucked behind an auto parts shop. The manager didn't ask questions, just nodded when I handed her the prepaid code. Inside, I placed a photo on top of the only box I'd labeled: Sarah, me, and Micah on his 5th birthday. No edits, no crops, just 3 people under one tree. Beside it, I added a legal folder marked Affidavit, Truth. I stepped back, closed the door, locked it. Outside, I handed the key to Ida. She held it with both hands. "If he ever comes honest," I said, "give it to him." She nodded, like she always did. I walked away, not from my past, but with it intact. That house may be gone, the furniture, the fireplace, the garden tools. Let them claim the yard. They never noticed the foundation anyway.